Hello, Fleur Allen here from Ask Fleur. I'm a business success coach, and the video today is focusing on step one of my next level success 10 steps on how to double your revenue. It's a free workbook, business workbook you can download from my website, askfleur.com. Fleur, you spell F-L-E-U-R. And it's yours for free. So go there, there's a tab free. So go grab it. Recommend you have that as you work through these videos. So if you haven't printed it out or got it on a screen or a device, stop the video and go grab it now. Step one is I talk about this step taking 100% responsibility all day long. And in particular, the formula, and before I continue, let's just share my screen so I can show you. Here is the PDF. We're looking at this free workbook. And if you go down to page 5, I do have a walkthrough video, which I'll include the link. So I'm going through every page and explaining it. So this video is focusing on step one, take 100% responsibility. And as I was about to say, it starts with you looking at the formula of event plus response equals outcome. So let's go back one step. This topic is actually chapter 1 of Jack Canfield's The Success Principles. And I'm training as one of his trainers. I'll be shortly an accredited trainer, Success Principles coach, which I'm really excited about. And therefore, that's the reason why, what's one of the reasons why I use that book as a resource, but also I've been using it myself personally. It was written in 2007, and I read it in around 2008, 2009. And I've been using it ever since. And my book looks like I've been using it ever since. Now, I have read this first chapter countless times. We are human, and sometimes we have good days and sometimes we have more challenging days. So sometimes reading this chapter can be challenging. And at other times it'll be, oh yeah, I know this, that's no problem. Most of the time, because I'm familiar with the content, that's the case. But if I'm going through some change or and unexpected challenges, then reading this chapter can be more challenging. So I invite you to act as if it's challenging reading this right now, sometimes just acting as though you do have absolute 100% control over everything that happens in your life. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of times people were finding it challenging to say, well, that had anything to do with me. So those sorts of environmental challenges make sometimes this harder pill to swallow. So act as if it's a principle. So it's a frame of mind. It's a mindset. So we're just practicing this, but just practicing a principle by behaving as though it's true still impacts you, your brain, your imagination, still accepts it as real. So let's accept 100% responsibility that we have control. So for example, think of an event. Let's choose something that's in business, and perhaps it was a way you reacted rather than responded. So whether it be a team member or a client or a supplier, whatever it might be, whatever first comes to mind, consider what the outcome could have been if you had have changed your response or reaction. So this is what it's all about. The events, let's say, for example, COVID-19 pandemic, we may not have been able to influence that too much in terms of a global level, but the way we reacted or responded to that will determine our outcomes for ourselves. Let me share a story. I think it was about 10 years ago. I went to the airport to go on a holiday to Bali, and I hadn't been on a holiday for a really long time. It was actually 11 years ago. So my son is now 18, so he would have been 7. I very rarely had a week off. So I probably hadn't had a holiday in about 3 years. So do you think I needed one? Yes, I did. Anyway, I had arranged to have, I think it was something like 5 days in Bali, which I was really looking forward to. Back then, because I was running a business and also had a young child, I really didn't have my head across details for everything. So, when you get the airport and there's all those big signs saying you need to have 6 months still left on your passport to be able to re-enter back into your own country. Well, I think I was something like a week, month short, and I couldn't believe it. However, I had turned up at the airport super, super early because my brother was using my car, and to fit his time schedule, we decided to go earlier rather than right on time. He had just dropped me off, and I'd walked in and, dealt with this situation immediately. And I just said to the person behind the counter, "What can I do?" And they said as a joke, "We can always drive into the city to the passport office and get a new passport." But they weren't serious. I went, "Okay." And they said, "It's not possible." And I looked at them and said, "Why not?" They said, "Well, there's processes and procedures to go through." And I said, "Well, I can always ask." My response to this event was not throwing my hands up in the air, yelling and arguing with the person, because it wasn't their fault. It was actually my fault. I was a bit embarrassed that I hadn't realised. And so I thought, well, I can't get on the flight. The flight's in something like 4 or 5 hours or something. It could have been longer. So what am I going to do in between? I thought, well, I rang my brother. He had my car. And he was just down the road. So he came back and he went, "Yeah, sure, I can drop you there and then I can bring you back later." So he said, "You're nuts. It's crazy. It's not going to happen." And I went, "Oh, well, nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?" Because I had made a mistake. I was taking responsibility. There was no point in yelling and arguing and carrying on because it was my fault. And I thought, well, I did come to the airport really, really super early, so let's go ask. So I went to the passport office and I asked them. They asked me a bunch of questions, such as, have I ever changed my name and all those sorts of things. And I had been married and divorced, but I actually hadn't changed my name. So cut a long story short, I hadn't legally changed my first and last names. So that was no problem. I think if that had have been the case, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to do it. But they didn't say to me they could, but they also didn't say to me that they couldn't. I spent a long time in that office just waiting. And I said to them, "Look, I need a passport either way, whether I get it today or not. So can we just go through the process? And I'm willing to wait." They said, "Sure, go do the things I needed to do, like get a current photo." So I went to the local post office around the corner and I got all those things done. And they said, "Look, there's no guarantees, but we can start the process." And I said, "Do you mind if I wait?" And they said, "No, you can wait." I said, "Look, if it so happens that you're able to process this, then I'd obviously take it and go on this trip." And they said, "Sure." But they never, ever said a hard no, but they also never said a firm yes. But I remember it was coming to I think their office closed at 4 o'clock and they were about to close. And I just spoke to the staff member and I said, "What do I do? Do I stay or do I leave?" They said, "No, we're happy for you to stay." And to cut a long story short, I did get my passport. It was a very, very fine line. I had to get back to the airport by a certain time. So I was ringing the desk where I had to turn up to start the process of going through, that closed at a certain time. They said, sure, if you're back by that time, we will get you through. We'll still have enough time to get through the process. But they never believed I would walk in with a passport. I drove my car. Back then I drove a Mini Cooper S, and my brother just said to me, I don't want to die. So I didn't drive too wildly. I probably drove a little bit spicier than what I normally would, having someone in the car, but it was my car. So I was familiar with it. Anyway, I got to the airport, the person behind the desk, I held up the passport and he said, no way. I said, no way, right? I got it. So that was a complete surprise to me. And it was because of the way I responded rather than reacted. And I'm not saying to you that go make that situation happen. I think I just got lucky. The passport office obviously had time to do it. There was no red flags for them to be able to do that. I'd certainly paid a premium to get a passport that quickly. However, I got to go on that holiday, and boy, did I need to go on that holiday. And in actual fact, that was back in 2013. It's 2024 that I'm filming this. That experience has stuck with me for so long because I was calm and I responded. I didn't react. And that experience has stayed with me ever since, because it was a direct application of taking 100% responsibility. So what in your life, in business, there's a great story I share in my live presentations when I share about this principle. It's Tony Robbins' No Vans story, which I think Jack Canfield shares in some of his trainings. And it's a great story. I'm sure if you Googled it, you'd find it, or else come to one of my live events and I'll share the story with you then. So I like to share different stories in different settings so that you get a more rich experience. So think about an event that you reacted to. So in the example I gave, I could have reacted. I could have just been awful, not taken responsibility, because at the end of the day, it was my fault. I hadn't checked my passport date, and it was my responsibility to have an up-to-date passport. And I could have reacted to that because I was embarrassed, because I was really disappointed that I wanted to go on the trip and I couldn't. I could have reacted. I could have been angry. I could have behaved poorly, but I chose not to. I chose to be calm and to just ask, well, what actually can I do? What do I have control over? So think of an event where you had an outcome that perhaps perhaps didn't go the way you had hoped. But if you're taking 100% responsibility, what did you have control over? So what response or reaction did you have to the event? And think about that, and think about, how could I have changed my response to receive and experience a different outcome? That's what this step is all about. It's take 100% responsibility. It starts with you. Event plus response equals outcome. This is what we've been talking about. And as written here, I've already shared that as an accredited success principles coach, well, soon to be, I refer to Jack Canfield's proven success principles as the foundation to supporting you to go to the next level of success in business. Beginning with taking full responsibility, this means recognizing that your response to any business event impacts your outcome. It's about adopting a mindset of ownership over every decision and action and approach each client interaction with dedication and purpose. So the things you have control over. Sometimes it is easier to begin by acting as if you have 100% responsibility for all events, which I explained a bit earlier. So I'm just looking at my version of the Next Level Success booklet that you can see on the screen. And I'm also referring to the workbook for the Success Principles book, looking at chapter 1. And Jack Canfield goes on into quite detail. Basically, you're needing to give up blaming, give up complaining, and making excuses. So that's what it's all about. So I find it a really interesting experience to go through a day and to just pay attention to how many times that you blame someone else or something else, a situation or an event like the weather or the economy or what have you, that you're complaining about something. So rather than complaining about someone or something, should you be going and communicating with that person or a team about a situation and making excuses, what you have to give up. So just facing the music and go, well, I made a mistake often. So rather than making excuses and justifying it, going through a day and noting. So I always find I regard myself as optimistic, as a positive person, but we're all human. And when I do this, I'm going, man, I blame, complain, and make excuses all the time. Well, we all do. So it's not about being perfect. It's just being mindful of these things and taking note and improving what we do to be the very best version of ourselves that we can be. So if you go down to the next page, it's where I've been asking you to think about. It's now to sit down and write about it. And I encourage you to reflect on your current responses to client inquiries and engagements. Where could you respond more effectively to influence better outcomes? So, for example, as a coach, many people don't really understand how I can help. So rather than get frustrated with people, I educate people on what I can do. And that's a big motivating reason why I created this resource. I actually was creating this resource for myself to make sure that I was going through all these steps with my top tier premium one-to-one clients. And as I was creating it, I thought this is actually a really great resource, not only for myself and those clients, but it's a workbook that you could actually work through yourself if you were motivated to do that. So my example for myself is I would be frustrated or angry or a bunch of negative responses if I really got hung up about how much people need reassurance and background information and proof of my credibility and all those sorts of things as a coach. That would just be wasting my time. So rather than react like, oh, come on, I can help you, because actually people don't know that I can help them, then I need to demonstrate that I can help them. And I can do things like create this resource. I can do things like share what my clients that I have worked with either in the past or currently, what they say about me, and do those sorts of things. So just before we wrap up, I just thought I'd say hello face to face rather than through this sharing the screen. So take that time to take action on that first step, on taking 100% responsibility, and just keep it with you throughout the day, the rest of the day, or the next day if you're doing this in the evening, to observe yourself, how you respond or react to situations. It's really interesting to observe yourself once you've thought about this. So I look forward to hearing from you and taking action.